dignitaries present here today, presenters, faculty, and students. A very special welcome to the inaugural session of our second international conference on the future of employment, challenges, and opportunities. The conference looks into various aspects of employment in terms of generating employment opportunities at a macro level, reducing inequality in wages, dynamics within the informal sector, gender issues, labor market practices, and of course, changing the employment scenario post the COVID-19 pandemic. We are truly honored to have with us today Dr. Vidya Yadav-Dekar, Pro-Chancellor, Symbiosis International University, Dr. Rajni Gupte, Vice Chancellor, Symbiosis International University, we also have with us the distinguished keynote speakers, Professor Alak Sharma, Director, Institute of Human Development, Mr. Satoshi Sasaki, Deputy Director, ILO, and Professor Santosh Mehrotra, Visiting Professor, University of Bath. I now request all dignitaries on the dais to light the lamp as a mark of hope that will light up our paths and lead us all to a brighter future.
Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityunjaya.
May I now call upon Dr. Deepa Gupta to take over the proceedings.
Thank you, ma'am. Professor Jyoti Chandramani is the Director, Symbiosis School of Economics and Dean, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. Ma'am, give me an opportunity to at least introduce you.
I think let there not be so much time between what we want to say and let the introductions go down here. A very good afternoon to one and all. I'm very privileged here to welcome all the dignitaries on the dais, our Pro-Chancellor Ma'am, Dr. Vidya Yadav-Dekar, our Vice Chancellor Ma'am, Dr. Rajni Gupte. We do feel the absence of our Chancellor Sir, Dr. Mazumdar, but I'm sure all of us together take this opportunity to welcome all our special guest dignitaries who have come here today. Dr. Alak Sharma ji, Director of Institute of Human Development and our partner for this conference, Mr. Satoshi Sasaki from ILO, Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, University of Bath, Visiting Professor, and for everybody for the intellectual inputs that they're going to bring in over here today. So warm welcome on behalf of SIU, Symbiosis International University, Symbiosis School of Economics, my faculty, my staff and students, welcome all the dignitaries on the dais, as well as we take this opportunity to welcome each and every one of you seated here for spending your very invaluable time on a very important issue, future of employment, challenges and opportunities. While we are here today, I take this journey back, about SSE. 2008, in this very auditorium, I remember sitting in the back when Montek Singh Ji Ahluwalia, inaugurated the school on the 1st of August, 2008. We are into our 15th year, and as we move on, from 80 students, we have moved to 800 plus students. We have a building by ourselves, all right? As I said, when you pass SB Road, you have to do an eyes left check turn. Anybody who's been a sports captain would know that. And I think you have to do your salams not only to the common man at, Symbiosis Vishwa Bhavan, but also to Symbiosis School of Economics, which is now right at the fore. Moving on, we have two very well curated programs: BSc Economic Honors, MSc Economics, and in MSc we offer 4 specializations: International Trade, Development Studies, Urban Development. Kunduji, you would be happy that this is the only school of economics to have a master's in urban development. And then we have Finance, and next year we are going to launch none other than Data Science as a 5th specialization. But what's very good, true to the spirit of inclusion and expansionary, role in higher education, our programs have all become online from this year. And so what has been curated has also moved to the online format, having a large number of international students also who are registered for this program. So not only the BSc Economics, the MSc Economics, as well as a diploma in quantitative economics, which is in the online format. So I think the school has really graduated well. And kudos goes to my team, from offline to online, to ODL, to teaching, to research, to institution building. All this would not have happened if they were not on team with us here. Coming to FECO and where we are today, future of employment, challenges and opportunities. Actually, when the Sustainable Development Goals had come up in 2017, we had our first international conference, and track 8 over there talked about growth and decent employment. And I think the trade-off that Mahesh ji was so well talking about in the morning session was captured out there. Moving on, in 2019-20, when we were into our 10th year, FECO was introduced as a biennial conference, but of course COVID played a spoil sport, and so did data. With no data, there was very little opportunity in the online mode to come in for FECO 2, because FECO 1 happened in 1920. FECO 1 report is on our website, has been shared with everybody, and we are going to be actually doing a comparative analysis of FECO 1 report and FECO 2 as we move on. So that was another point for FECO that was started in 1920. And because of the pandemic, we didn't have it 2 years back. And exactly into our 15th year, we are having second FECO, that is Future of Employment Challenges and Opportunities, with 45 to 50 papers coming from Jadavpur University, IGIDR, Gokhale Institute, number of symbiosis institutions, JNU, and people from abroad also. So international universities, we've got a couple of papers touching abroad the 5 themes that we have elaborated. So very happy to have this year. We have tie-ups with IGIDR Journal and IHD Journal for Scopus publications that will get selected based on peer review and of course quality of papers. So moving forward, the employment has become a major macroeconomic objective that needs to be addressed, and that's what Symbiosis School of Economics is going to focus on. That is why we had 2019 at that point of time, the conference. So in 2015, when the growth rate stood at 8% and started declining to 6.45 in 2018 to 3.74 in 2019, there is adequate data to show that poverty numbers did increase, unemployment numbers did go up, and this was in the backdrop of demonetization of 2016, GST 2017, and of course the slowdown that happened in the Indian economy. I think you saw in the earlier slides that we even had certain aspects of lack of investments that were coming in from the private sector. So these trends showed, and then the size of the Indian labor force actually has declined. From what Mahesh ji showed the data, the 430 million he talked about who are working in today, that same figure that was there earlier, in probably 1990, the figure of labor force was 350 million. In 2005, this figure went up to 446 million. And then, can you believe it, that between 2005 and 2021, 22 December, if you have a figure of 430 million, then we have less number of people in the job market as of now. The CAGR for the first 15 years from 1990 till 2005 was 2.2%, where we were increasing the labor force at 8.2 million a year. But subsequently, the CAGR is just 0.34%. But that too, if you take it at the present junction, if you take that ILO figures, but if you take other figures, it would be maybe in negative at this point. So there is these issues of low labor force participation rate, the low female labor force participation rate, and on gender we have an absolute track tomorrow morning, so I'm not going to discuss much on that. But the fact that our labor force participation rate is so low, and only countries like Afghanistan, Egypt, Iran, Iraq are lower than us, speaks volumes. Of course, the data is not showing what we need to see, and therefore the data needs to be recaptured. One of the facts that have been improving is the gross enrollment ratio, which has been increasing, showing more and more people entering into higher education. This was at 20.8% in 2011-12, has inched up to 26.3%, and you know that the government has set a target of 50% by 2035. 357 universities in 2005, and now 1070 universities in 2022. Probably we are crossing the number of universities there are more universities in select districts. I hope each district is covered with a university. The large amount of people who are not in education, employment, and training in the age group of 18 to 24, 33%, that talks about the youth unemployment. So while globally there are 2 billion people who belong to the informal labor market, India could very easily be contributing to the global informal labor market to the tune of 18 to 21%. Well, this is the facts and figures of employment. But I'm sure every challenge leads new levels of opportunities for us to move forward. Given this backdrop, I'm sure the data is not capturing well. There are socially, culturally, transitionary stages, which I hope, as you know, Mashelkar just says, Mashelkar is a great person from Pune who keeps talking about how India is not going to leapfrog but pole vault, and he talks about being a dangerous optimist. I think we all have to be dangerous optimists at this point and hope that we are at that point of inflection where we are going to take off. And now, the fourth industrial revolution and beyond. New jobs, new opportunities. I'm talking about this with a ray of hope as we have students out here today, where we are coming at Symbiosis International University. We have the Symbiosis Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, hoping that we are going to have unicorns one day from our center. The Symbiosis Center for Artificial Intelligence, which is going to be the future of jobs in terms of AI. We have seen that actually get translated in a few ways. And when we are talking about all this, the recently launched Chat GPT in November, a powerful chat box by OpenAI, provides glimpses of what is to come. GPT, or the Generative Pre-trained Transformer, is a state-of-the-art language processing artificial intelligence model capable of generating human-like output for many simple and complex tasks, including coding. And when all this happens, you will need critical thinkers. When all this happens, you will need humanities even more. And therefore, we have a very well-evolving, well-developed humanities department, a Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. With Symbiosis School of Economics, as I've already described, we were ahead of our times, and we had the Symbiosis School for Liberal Arts with almost 10 to 12 majors and 15 minors, a 4-year program which is already there. So that is the Symbiosis School for Liberal Arts. Then we have the Symbiosis School for International Studies, which talks about areas, whether it's Africa, whether it's Europe. We have the African and European Studies Centers too, and the Symbiosis Statistical Institution. We have Dr. Sharvari Shukla here. She's a genius in her own right and contributes in a major way with various projects. So to stitch all this together, universities are here to create knowledge. Universities are here to make changes in society. And I, as a part of Symbiosis International University, feel privileged that Symbiosis is doing exactly that, trying in its own way, making development changes by linking various multidisciplinary faculty together to create great outputs for tomorrow. And my last few words that I have to say, I think Symbiosis International University, steered by Dr. Muzumdar, who dreams, absolutely, executed exemplarily by none other than Dr. Vidya Yarwadekar and Dr. Rajni Gupte, the Pro-Chancellor and Vice-Chancellor, have steered us to NAC A++, and we deserve a standing ovation for that. Let us please acknowledge our leaders here for this. And I think everybody, a thunderous applause for a momentous moment for us. Yes. And in NIRF ranking, we are at 32. So this is the first time that ma'am has come after the NAC result. And I think it's a very proud moment for all of us here. Over to FECO 2 and Sudeepa for the... Deepa, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. We are honored to have the presence of Dr. Rajni Gupte, our Vice Chancellor, Symbiosis International Deemed University. Dr. Rajni Gupte is a distinguished academician, having taught at many foreign universities and has been actively engaged in the higher education for more than 3 decades. She has received several awards for her outstanding contribution to education and was one of the top 10 women selected from across Asia to attend the Women in University Administration program sponsored by the US Department of State. I now request ma'am to share her thoughts. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Deepa. Good morning, everyone. Let me extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you from the Symbiosis International University. Dr. Vidya Yarwadekar, the Pro-Chancellor of the Symbiosis International University, our esteemed guests who are here on the dais with us, Dr. Alak Sharma, Dr. Satoshi Sasaki, Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, Dr. Mahesh Vyas, Dr. Amitabh Kundu, Dr. Saikat Sinha Roy, Dr. Uma Rani, Dr. Ravi Srivastav, Dr. Sandhya Iyer, Dr. Ashwini Deshpande, Dr. Ritu Diwan, Dr. Subrata Sarkar, Dr. Radhika Kapoor, Dr. Amarnath Tripathi, and Dr. Vishal Dagar. I mentioned these names specifically to highlight that you have a feast in store for you. You have such wonderful speakers assembled over here for this conference, which, as Dr. Jyoti has rightly mentioned, has been put in place to deliberate on issues relating to employment. And I think this is a topic that is very close to everyone's heart, but a little more later about that. You've seen the film, all of you, and I'm sure the guests also saw the film on symbiosis. So you do know that Symbiosis is a multidisciplinary university, and rightly this gives us an opportunity to leverage what the NEP, the new education policy, is talking about. It talks about single disciplinary universities being converted into multidisciplinary universities so that we can leverage across disciplines, knowledge can flow. And I think this is something that Symbiosis is well poised to undertake. We will be actually launching the 4-year degree programs. So I think that's one more announcement that we will be making shortly. So we will have, in line with the NEP, 4-year undergraduate degree programs, where the 4th year will be on research, or it will be for honors programs where you go deeper into the chosen area of expertise. Conferences such as this is something that Symbiosis encourages because we do believe that what happens in the classroom is one part of your education. But we also believe that a lot of learning happens outside the classroom and at events like this, where you have an opportunity to listen to experts from various domains, to interact with them, to work together, and to listen to different ideas, which will, I hope, light a spark within you to explore different dimensions of the topics that are being discussed. As students of economics, I'm sure you're all excited about listening to some of these eminent speakers. And the conference topic, as I was mentioning to you, is really, really relevant. And I think it is a topic, Dr. Jyoti, you've selected the theme which is relevant across for many years. It's not something that it's not a one time thing. It's the themes within the conference that could keep changing. And I could see that every theme that you have talked about, whether it's informal sector or whether it is women and employment or the labor market practices, policies, each one of them has great relevance today. When the world and the West is poised for a recession, I think we are reading about all of that. And we are hoping that things will settle down globally. But we do see winds of change happening in India. And I think we are set to buck the trend. And when we talk about the labor, I think Dr. Jyoti also referred to this about the increase in the gross enrollment ratio. When I look at education figures, I realize that women in education, the numbers are rising in higher education. At the same time, we notice that the female labor force participation rate is dropping. Now, this is not something what one would expect, but I think definitely there's been a lot of work which has been done in this area and an area of concern, because if you're leaving out 50% of the women in the population, I think that's something that should be cause for worry. Looking at the nature of employment in the years to come, COVID gave us a glimpse of something that we had not really thought about. Employment changed, and in some ways has changed forever, I think. People looking at the workplace differently, organizations looking at employees differently. And I think this is something that will stay. Employment will not be the way we have known it for so many years. People will have possibly, their many jobs. In our time, we used to have people who joined and possibly retired from the same place. People like me who spent more than 3 decades in this institution. But that's something that will not happen in the years to come. People will move from job to job and therefore will have to learn newer skills and keep upgrading, which is where continuous learning or lifelong learning becomes extremely important. And in this context, I think the skill sets that are required. It's more than the knowledge that we are talking about. We are talking about the ability or the skills that are required for the 21st century, which is a challenge for educational institutions to impart to young students. I wish the conference all the very best. I'm sure we're all eager to listen to all the great speakers who are here. My very best wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Vidya Yaravadikar is the Principal Director of Symbiosis Society and the Pro-Chancellor of Symbiosis International Deemed University. Ma'am holds a doctorate in internationalization of higher education in India. She has been facilitator of innovative approaches to higher education in India through her association with UGC, the Central Advisory Board of Education, and the Indian Council for Cultural Relations. She is a chairperson of the FECO Committee on the Higher Education and has been appointed as a member of India Brand Equity Foundation Trust. Dr. Vidya has been ranked 14th amongst the top 25 women in India. Ma'am is now committed to shaping higher education globally through her extensive work in the field of internationalization of higher education. It's always a pleasure to hear you, ma'am. Please, may I request you to address the gathering.
August members on the dais, faculty members, and my dear students, press, and media. First of all, it gives me great pleasure to be here this afternoon to address a large number of students here and even faculty and people who come from outside Symbiosis. Many of you must have seen the film on Symbiosis and would be happy to know that Symbiosis has completed 50 long years. And the commitment of each and every person sitting here, like Jyoti, Dr. Rajni, and even others who are sitting in the audience, has brought Symbiosis to what it is today. And more importantly, it's students like you who bring back laurels to this organization, because when you pass out and enter the job world or job market, and are skilled enough to create not just identities for each one of you and your families, but also bring back an identity to this organization. So I must thank you for all this. Jyoti did mention about the NAC A++, and I think that's a great feather in our cap. It doesn't mean that it's just the highest rank that we've achieved, but I think it means more than this, the kind of autonomy that is given by the Government of India, the Ministry of Education, placing the university in Category 1. And I think for every organization, every educational organization and universities, I think this academic autonomy is something that we look forward to, and we're very happy that being a deemed university, and that too being in Category 1, we do enjoy this autonomy. And I think it's through this autonomy that the curricula that is framed, the syllabus that is framed in universities like Symbiosis and several other Category 1 universities, provide a kind of platform for not just academicians, but also students who learn and move through this platform to become holistic individuals, become skilled individuals, and then pass on the knowledge and skills that they have achieved to the outside world, to the corporate world. Jyoti, I'm very happy with the topics that you have selected this time for FECO. And when we look at the future of employment, challenges and opportunities, I think it's more challenging for us as academicians, and I think there are more opportunities for students, young students like you all sitting in the audience, because the whole world has changed. And I'm the only non-economist here probably in this whole auditorium. I'm a medical doctor by training, don't understand much of economics, but whatever I understand of the world of education that I have been in for the last 25 years because of my father and because of my passion for higher education and school education. Just a few things that I would like to share with you. So there are opportunities for all of you, especially post-pandemic, when the whole world has moved to becoming a totally different place. Even as a medical doctor, I couldn't have imagined what any one of us as individuals and any one of us as medical doctors who treated individuals would go through in our lifetime. And I think things have changed for each one of us at a personal level as well as a professional level. And there have been several opportunities that have really come up, because with the change, there are a lot of opportunities. The highest use of technology that we never ever did or encountered has happened in the last 2 years. And we have become smart as teachers. We adopted to this technology because we were forced to adapt and adopt to it because there was no option. It's very hard for us to make teachers adapt to anything. It's easy for us to make students, adapt to anything that is new. So we did do that, and we shifted from what was a face-to-face education to a sudden online education. And it wasn't just speaking in front of a screen, but it was to engage students who are, somewhere sitting in their homes and making, whatever we taught enjoyable and engaging. I think that was the most challenging part. And I'm very happy that all our teachers came together and did that and did adapt to this change that happened. And I must applaud the students also, because students, though were technologically much more sound than any one of us, but to sit in a class and to listen to teachers through a medium of online education isn't something that you would be happy about. And for some of y'all sitting in the audience, and some of them who have passed out of programs who were only 2-year programs like the MBA or the MSc programs, I must say that those 2 years must have been really, really challenging for doing a university education without entering classrooms. So I think you all are the lucky ones that have got this opportunity to enter classrooms and to engage with not just teachers, but even your peers, and there would be so much of learning. Education has changed and will change. Just yesterday, Dr. Raman, who's the Dean of Management and the Director of Strategy at Symbiosis, gave me an excellent presentation on how AI, can change the whole education. And the kind of apps that he showed me, and one of which Jyoti mentioned about the Chat GPT, It was just mind boggling. And I just asked him a question, then what do we do with all of us sitting here in thousands of teachers in Symbiosis? How are we to change and adapt to this new world of artificial intelligence in education? And there's such smart students who would be knowing these tools far better than what Dr. Raman knows. And how do we evaluate these students, when everything is available and, they can create, in fact, they can even create research papers with a, click of the button. How will things change for us? And I think that is the most important point of discussion for all of us in any university in India or globally, that, what is it that new that we can bring to the table so as to, mitigate these challenges and create more and more opportunities for you. So I think there is a lot of homework back end that we will have to do for all of you sitting here. Then the second is the way employment has changed. Work from home has become the norm for several companies, at least several IT companies. In fact, many in education, and especially in administration of education, even ask us that can we sit at home and work? I mean, why is it necessary for all of us to come to schools and colleges when we can do things sitting in our homes? But I think the face-to-face education or the face-to-face interaction or the societal interaction that must happen has to happen, because education is not about just gaining knowledge, but education is much beyond gaining knowledge in the classrooms. It's much beyond interacting with your peers. I think there is a social and emotional angle, and the interactions are far more important than just not being interacting with anyone. But I'm sure for IT companies, it's less expensive, and it's much better to have people sitting at home. And I've heard that employees don't even know each other. They're just sitting in their homes and operating for a company and contributing to the growth of that company. So I think job opportunities have changed in several aspects, and for all of you in the new generation, it is not just what you learn from all of us in classrooms, but it is for you all to do a lot of self-learning and relearning so that you make yourselves employable, skilled, and also have your own characters being built through social interactions. So I think these conferences, like what Jyoti has organized, and several such conferences that happen on our university campus, are for this enrichment of knowledge of these students, so that when you enter the portals of the society, whether it's the corporate world or NGOs or any other organizations that you work for, we not just make you skilled and employable, but we hope that you all become good individuals, good citizens of this country, and eventually global citizens. So thank you, Jyoti, for inviting all of us here. I'm very happy to interact with all the economists that you've gathered in large numbers, and a little bit of knowledge that I will get through this interaction and attending this conference, I will feel really enriched. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. May I now call upon Dr. Sudeepa Majumdar, Professor and Deputy Director of Symbiosis School of Economics, to introduce the speakers to us.
I take the privilege of introducing our keynote speakers to you. Professor Alak Sharma is the Director of the Institute of Human Development. He has made significant contributions to research in areas such as livelihoods, employment, labor markets, and related issues. He has been a consultant to international organizations such as the ILO, UNDP, and the World Bank. He is the editor of the Indian Journal of Labor Economics and the Quarterly Journal of the Indian Society of Labor Economics, as well as the co-editor of the Indian Journal of Human Development. It is our honor to be associated with the Institute of Human Development, and Alak sir has been a key mentor and an academic partner for this conference. May I now request Vidya ma'am to felicitate Professor Alak Sharma with a handcrafted copper lamp. It is our pleasure to have amongst us the Deputy Director of ILO, Mr. Satoshi Sasaki. Mr. Satoshi heads the ILO unit for decent working for South Asia. He has been with the ILO for more than 2 decades and has worked extensively with government and international technical agencies, including the United Nations. He has served in different capacities in Japan, in Solomon Islands, Philippines, Bangladesh, China, Thailand, and Fiji. We are privileged to have the support of ILO for this conference, both from their Geneva office as well as from their New Delhi office. I now request Vidya ma'am to felicitate Mr. Santoshi. Professor Santosh Mehrotra is the visiting professor at the Center of Development Studies, University of Bath, and a research fellow at IZA Institute of Labor Economics in Germany. Earlier, he had been the professor of economics and chair of the Center for Informal Sector and Labor at JNU New Delhi. He is a human development economist focusing on areas of labor, employment, and skill development. He has worked extensively with UNICEF, with UNDP, as well as the Development Policy Division and the Planning Commission of India. I request Vidya ma'am to felicitate Professor Santosh Mehrotra. Please welcome our first keynote speaker, Professor Alak Sharma, to share his valuable thoughts.
Honorable Pro-Chancellor Dr. Vidya Rabdekar, Honorable Pro-Vice Chancellor Dr. Rajni Gupte, Director of the Symbiosis School of Economics, Dr. Chandiramani, Deputy Director Dr. Sudeepa Majumdar, ILO Officiating Director Mr. Satoshi Sasaki, and my very good friend Dr. Santosh Mehrotra. Ladies and gentlemen, I am extremely thankful to Symbiosis School of Economics and particularly to Dr. Jyoti Chandramani for providing me this opportunity to come here and address this gathering, and also making ISD a partner in organizing this conference. Friends, in the earlier session was a thematic session. This is not a thematic session, this is a general session, inaugural session. So I thought that in my 15 minutes, I will choose a very general topic, which is relevant for or appropriate for the entire conference. I'm sorry that expert economists, senior economists who are sitting here, they might be finding it somewhat repetitive because it is very simplistic. But my topic is emerging and future employment challenges in India. I provided overview. And also point towards the end, what are some policy pointers. So it is based on, it is pre-COVID situation, before COVID, and also it is based on official statistics. I'm sorry that I am not very much familiar with the REACH CMI data, which was presented in the last session. But with this caveat, let me very briefly tell you about the major employment challenges. So before I come to that, as you know, India has witnessed a very high rate of growth of around 6% for the last 4 decades. In spite of slowdown in the growth since 2008, collapse during COVID and all that, even then the average growth has been around 6%. And indications are that almost entirely agreed, widely agreed, that during next 15 years, India will be growing roughly 5 to 6%, given the demographic advantage that we'll have during next 1.5 decades, not beyond that. After that, we are going to lose. So all these 4 decades, have, of course, poverty has declined. Absolute poverty is at a very low level now, and significant reduction in other indicators of poverty and deprivation. So what has been, but the changes in the labor market has been rather small, not that significant. There has been slow reduction. I'm just giving you a bird's eye view of what happened during last 2 decades. Not after independence, 75 years, during last 2 decades. So very slow reduction in share of employment in agriculture, increase in share of services, manufacturing almost stagnant share of employment. There has been significant rise in labor productivity, almost in all sectors, and this is largely due to increasing capital intensity. This has nothing to do with a fourth industrial revolution or robots or anything, including increasing capital intensity. There has been a small increase of regular workers and also organized sector workers. This is particularly happening since 2003 to 2004. But overall, our growth has been less and less employment intensive. Somebody was talking about employment elasticity. It is not a very good measure, but for the Indian economy as a whole. But for organized sector also, our in which employment elasticity concept we can introduce, our employment elasticity has been declining, and manufacturing employment, of course, declined between 2012 and 2019. Before that, there was somewhat a satisfactory growth. The other important trend was there has been decrease in the share of labor wages compared to share of capital. So increase in the labor market inequality. So how is Indian labor market now? Just some sterilized facts I am giving you. It is still, in spite of India being a middle income country, is still something like a poor developing country with high levels of poverty, deprivation still, but low levels of unemployment. Mind it, unemployment level is not that high as in European countries. It was hovering around 2-3% till recently. Only during last 3-4 years it has become 6%, sometimes 7%, which is not very high compared to the global, but poverty is high. This is typical of a poor developing country. Very high share of workforce is still in agriculture, 42%, one of the highest in the world. High degree of informality in labor market, almost 90% workers informal. Again, one of the highest in the world. Segmentation in labor market, gender, rural, urban, it is always social classes, all have been there. And everybody, most of the people talked about female workforce participation rate. It is roughly around 25% now, declining. That is a different story. But again, it is one of the lowest in the world. Important fact is, our development path has been different from the rest of the world, where industry has been the driver of growth. Our growth pattern has been driven by services during last 2 decades or 3 decades. So this is the background. And now in this background, what are the key employment challenges, which is the central theme of this seminar? I consider that creation of a huge number of jobs in the wake of increasing youth unemployment, particularly of educated youth, is the most important challenge facing the country. Something like 90 million jobs, the country has been estimated, decent jobs I mean, need to be created between 2023 from now to 2030. Means something like 9 million per year, which is a huge challenge. Educated youth, I said, educated youth accounted for 37% of total unemployment in the country in 1983. Now it is close to 70%. Unemployment among graduates, it is all official statistics, as I said in the beginning. Unemployment among graduates, it is 39%, and it is higher among technical graduates. And mind it, our gross enrollment ratio in higher education is still one of the lowest in the world, and it is going to increase significantly. Now, with the increasing enrollment in higher education, there will be mind-boggling growth in youth unemployment, estimated to be something like 62 million by 2030 unemployed persons in the country. So, as I said, 90 million jobs need to be created in the next 10 years. The other important challenge is, and everybody said, low and declining women work participation, but increasing unemployment. By the way, unemployment among educated women is much higher than educated men. And I'm not going to factor discrimination, many factors. But it has been estimated that with rise in the education of women, more and more women are going to join in near future in labor force. By the way, the labor force participation of women, as you know, for economists, U-shaped curve. In case of more educated women, labor force participation is higher. So now that women are getting educated, and many economists have said, and my view is also, that more and more women are going to join the labor force, not workforce, labor force. So if they don't get job, they will be. So issues of their migration, infrastructure facility, crèche, whole lot of factors becomes very important. The third important challenge is low levels of education and skills. By the way, even now, 60% of the Indian workforce is uneducated, less than secondary education, in spite of this huge unemployment, educated and all that. And poor quality of education, I need not repeat more, but this is a serious issue. So improving the quality, and during next 15 years, this demographic advantage will be there. So expansion in education and skills, another challenge. And this high informality, as I said, highest in the world. So managing transition of labor from low productive agriculture or sectors to more productive sectors, and movement of workers from rural to urban, which is going to increase. Urbanization is going to increase. I think rural-urban connectivity, all that. So it is another challenge. The fifth important challenge is this new technological change and digitization. By the way, we have been adopting technology, and I said that Indian industry has been becoming more and more capital intensive over the years. I have 5 minutes? Yeah. Uh, so, but with this digitization and new technology, uncertainties in the labor markets have emerged. New challenges and new opportunities are emerging. As you know, something like uh, 7 million jobs it is estimated. So dig and platform workers have been, and estimation is that it is going to unfold. But it is also excluding a large number of unskilled workers. By the way, our jobs are contrary to global trend. Indian labor market, unskilled workers and less skilled workers are being pushed. Different kind and more skilled workers are getting jobs. So this kind of job polarization is an important challenge. So need of institutional mechanism for gig and platform workers. So these are a different kind of challenge which we have to address. And lastly, there are several challenges, but I have listed 6. Challenge of inequalities and segmentation. As I said, less skilled, unskilled, more skilled, labor market inequalities, rural and urban division, all that. The inequalities, disparity, and exclusion that it will create and creating, the policy government has to address and all of us have to address. I have just one slide more. Now, meeting this challenge, how to meet it? Of course, I can't venture to do that, and this is beyond, but this is a collective responsibility of the country. But I think this I have 5-6 points on which I think they are very important in meeting this challenge. One is this employment intensive growth path. We have to change our growth path. And Mr. Mahesh Vyas in the morning told you something about how our policies, macro policies are not consistent and all that. But new, we have really missed the bus of industrialization. But at the same time, as I said earlier, that 60% of our workers are less skilled, not educated. So many of them need to be employed in industry. But now, with increase in technological change, industrialization has become very different and less employment intensive. But even then, so a combination of manufacturing along with services, I think this is the how to combine it, how to do it, proper balance. This is the important challenge, so that unskilled workers are also employed and increasingly educated and skill-intensive workers are also employed. So this is the first point. And I have particularly mentioned creation of suitable jobs for future women workers who are going to join labor markets in a large number. The second policy pointer, policies and measures to address the issue of education and skill acquisition. I said expansion of education, improving quality, and retraining and training of workers in the eke of skill change, the constant skill changes. This will become another important. Third, managing urbanization and migration. Professor Kundu talked about rural, urban, small towns, and I think they will become engine of growth if we want. So we have to give a lot of importance to that kind of, and managing migration, including migration of women. Women employment, educated women employment in rural areas, some of the states like Bihar, Jharkhand, it is 60% because they can't migrate. Boys can migrate. So managing migration is going to be urban planning. Is going to be a very important issue. And fourth, a strategy of gradual formalization of workers. We can't afford to have 90% of the workers informal. But this definition, 10 workers, factory, this is a old definition. Now, new device. Maybe you lower the size of the firm. Now everybody GST paying, income tax paying. How to do it? I'm saying there are several mechanisms through which social protection can be provided. So this is one. And policies to address disparities and inequality, education infrastructure becomes very important. Universalization of social protection, unemployment insurance, time has come to discuss about it. And lastly, labor markets are going to become more and more complex in the wake of digitization, technological change, uncertainty will rise. So regular mapping of data, labor market trends is extremely important, and that is why the strength of data like CMI, which provides real basis data, weekly data, becomes critical. So with these words, thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Alak sir. May I now call upon Mr. Satoshi to deliver his keynote address.
Dignitaries on the dais, labor economists, resource persons, fellow students, and participants. It is a pleasure to speak today at the inauguration session of the International Conference of Future of Employment, Challenges and Opportunities. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Symbiosis School of Economics for organizing this conference with objective of discussing the social and economic development in the employment and livelihood opportunities around the world, challenges faced during the COVID-19 period, and the exploring the future opportunities. The Future of Work initiative was proposed by the ILO Director General in the year of 2013 as one of the 7 centenary initiatives. With the launch of the initiative in 2015, the ILO embarked on the 4-year journey that began with a series of national dialogues, followed by the report of Independent Global Commission, and culminating in the adoption of the Centenary Declaration on the Future of Work at the 108th International Labour Conference in 2019. The declaration recognizes that the world of work is undergoing transformative change driven by technological innovation, demographic shifts, climate change, and globalization. It sets out a roadmap of action for organization and its tripartite constituents to shape and direct these changes through a human-centered approach to the future of work in the context of the persistent poverty, inequalities, injustices, conflict, and disasters that continue to threaten the shared prosperity and decent work for all. COVID-19 was declared as a pandemic by the World Health Organization 9 months after the adoption of the Centenary Declaration. It plunged the world into the unprecedented health and economic crisis and uncertainties. The most disadvantaged and vulnerable were hit the hardest and in the most cruel ways, exposing the devastating consequences of inequalities. It has caused were the losses in working hours, translating into increased unemployment, underemployment, inactivity, and informality, and diminished labor and business outcome, including enterprises closures, bankruptcies, particularly for the small enterprises, and brought new challenges in occupational safety and health and fundamental rights at work. Also disrupted supply chains with wide-ranging implications for the workers involved. And as a result of these, it exacerbated poverty as well as gender, economic, and social inequality. In response to the complex global challenges, in September 2021, the United Nations Secretary General launched the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection for Just Transition, with the aim of fast-tracking much-needed global actions to promote a job-rich recovery, as well as just for the ecological, technological, and societal transitions to more sustainable and inclusive economies. The Global Accelerator operates through three complementary and mutually supportive pillars. First, the development of in-country integrated and coordinated employment and social protection policies and strategies to facilitate just transition. Second, the establishment of the national financing frameworks and the mobilization of public and private, domestic and international resources to support the implementation of integrated policies and strategies. And thirdly, the improved multilateral cooperation on jobs and social protection for just transitions, including the international financial institutions and multilateral development banks. The ILO was prompt to identify that the new coronavirus pandemic is not just a medical crisis, but as a social and economic one too. The organization was quick to materialize the four-pillar policy response frameworks for the recovering of the impact of the COVID-19. That includes stimulating economic and labor demands, supporting enterprises, jobs and incomes, protecting workers in the workplace, and relying on the social dialogue for solutions. The ILO has been working closely with the constituents, the government, employers and workers organizations to provide relief to the workers affected by the pandemic, while identifying and promoting the good practices of workplace cooperation and decent work. As some of the examples, during the pandemic, ILO took the initiative to setting up the Workers' Information and Service Centers, we call it the WISC, with the cooperation of the central trade unions in different parts of the country. The WISCs have been carrying out relief and rehabilitation efforts as envisioned in the Global Call to Action for Human-Centered Recovery from the COVID-19 Crisis, that is inclusive, sustainable, and resilient. Further, with the employers, the ILO collaborated with All India Organization of Employers and also with the Employers Federation of India to develop a report on the good employee relation practices in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and lessons learned in India. We also took cognizance of the grave crisis faced by the migrant workers, including internal labor migrants during the pandemic period. In response, the ILO is working closely with the constituents to set up systems to build capacity among employers and workers' organizations to prepare and for responding to such crises. These and many more such valuable lessons and initiatives have been integrated in our core work and continue to inform our program going forward. India has one of the lowest female labor force participation rate globally. Women are disproportionately affected during the COVID-19 pandemic and in the after waves. A human-centered recovery from the multiple crises faced us requires improving female force participation. This requires concerted investment in their education and employment opportunities, including in the care economy, reducing gender-based discrimination in wages, recruitment, and conditions of employment. And also, equally investing in creating environment at work and while commuting and to and from work that are free from violence and harassment. The flip side of the India's potential demographic dividend is the challenge of providing employment, especially quality employment, becomes extremely daunting because of the numbers involved. The country hosts the largest population of youth in the workforce. Additionally, the large proportion of the workers are engaged in informal employment, marked by decent work deficit arising from job insecurity, income insecurity, lack of effective social protection, low prevalence of workers' organizations, and limited social dialogue. For India to move forward fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals and ILO's mandate for social justice and decent work, employment indicators call for particular focus. The equality of existing jobs needs to improve apart from the addition of the huge number of decent work opportunities for the existing unemployed and new entrants to the labor force, including women, youth, and differently abled. This has to also take into account the growth and patterns of the new forms of employment, such as in the gig and the platform economy and in e-commerce service industries. At country level, Decent Work Country Program offers the roadmap to guide the contribution of the ILO to country's agenda for next 5 years. I would like to take this opportunity to mention that recently we have launched the Decent Work Country Program for the next 5 years, 2023 to 27, which is fourth successive Decent Work Country Program formulated by the ILO and its tripartite constituents. Resilient economic growth, climate action, and women-led development are the key priorities for India as it moves forward to its 75th year of independence in 2022, and also as it assumes the G20 presidency for this year. The beginning of this Decent Work Country Program, then, comes at the historic juncture of India's development journey, endowed with the useful labor force, its potential demographic dividend, a vibrant startup ecology, and thriving service economy. The nation aspires to transform itself into a mature, developed, and largely green economy in the next 25 years. It means by the time it celebrates the centenary of the independence. The global success of the 2030 development agenda depends on India, which represent 1/6 of the humanity, but accounts for between a quarter and a half of the Sustainable Development Goals burden. India's Decent Work Country program is grounded in strategic pillars of ILO, which are employment, universal social protection, social dialogue, and fundamental rights at work, including health and safety at the workplace. Also, it is based on the relevant ILO standards and focused on the achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, in particularly the Goal 8, promoting sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. The ILO Decent Work Technical Support Team for South Asia and country office in India operates with the wide range of programs and the project in the sub-region, focusing on development challenges. You can see the details of this for the programs and for the project on our website. So once again, I would like to thank the organizer for this very important conference, and I am looking forward to the deliberations. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me, Dr. Jyoti. It's a real privilege to be amongst a very distinguished faculty of symbiosis, but also a very distinguished set of labor economists from across the country and the globe. So thank you. I feel privileged to have been included in this category. I'm really pleased to be back here associated with FECO. And I watched the video. I think it's very impressive how much progress symbiosis generally has made in a short time, and above all, the school has made. I mean, the school, I noted from Dr. Jyoti's remarks, was opened by my erstwhile boss, Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, in the Planning Commission, and I recall when I was in the Planning Commission. And it's really impressive to see how much the School of Economics has actually evolved from a small school to what it is today. So congratulations to all of you, for all of you who've made this possible. So I'm going to be speaking about India's employment challenges in the 2020s in particular. Why in the 2020s in particular is something I'll specify in a second, and how in the most recent past, especially in the last decade or so, as I will attempt to demonstrate, the structural change that the economy was undergoing over a period from about 2000 onwards at a very fast pace, not only stalled in the last 8 to 10 years, but it has actually been reversed. And why the demographic dividend is so important. Now, the demographic dividend is defined as that period in the life of a nation. It comes in the life of every nation, which is defined as that period when the share of the working age population is rising and the share of the dependent population is falling. The share of the dependent population consists of two groups. One are those who are below 15, below working age, and then there are those who are going to be retirees over 60. So the dividend is defined as that period in the life of a nation where the share of the working age population is rising and the share of the dependent population is falling. And why it's a dividend is something very important for you to understand. All of you are actually part of this dividend. Our dividend began in the early 1980s. It will be over by the end of the next decade, by 2040. And if we do not realize this dividend, it will be lost forever because it comes but once in the life of a nation. China's dividend is already over, but it rode the wave of the dividend and grew at something like 9 to 10% per annum for 30 years and reduced poverty over that period. The real challenge that we are facing, are we going to be able to do that? And for that, China managed structural change. How structural change? Well, that was defined by Simon Kuznets long ago. I think it's already been mentioned that in the process of structural change, workers in agriculture move out of agriculture into first industry, manufacturing in particular, and then into services. And similarly, the contribution of industry and of services increases at the cost of the contribution of agriculture. That structural change had been hastened in the first half, in the period from about 2000 to about 2014. Since then, that process has been reversed. Now, having understood why this is so important, the dividend is so important. I mean, just one other thing about why the dividend is important. Because if we don't realize the dividend, then what will happen is that from 2040 onwards, all the two-thirds of the population, which is today below 35, two-thirds of our population today is below 35. In 20 years, they'll be 55, and they'll be very close to retirement age. China's leaders today have been saying since 2015, when their dividend ended, that Europe became old after they became rich. We have become old without becoming rich. Now, China was at the same level of per capita income as us in 1980. They are 5 times as much as us today. Imagine what our situation will be like if we don't grow fast, provide jobs to young people, because then we will have aged without having become rich. Do you see the enormity and the monumentality of the challenge that you, the young people, and the young faculty in this room face? So there's a dividend now, but there are 3 demographic groups who need desperately jobs in the non-farm sector. Because why non-farm sector? Obviously, that's the meaning of structural change, right? But each of these groups forms a looming crisis. The first group consists of the farm landless and small and marginal farmers. We all know that they want to leave agriculture because agriculture is in distress. Their plot sizes have been shrinking over a period of time. But if non-farm jobs are not growing, where will they go? The young have all gotten educated in rural areas. They want non-farm jobs. That's one big group waiting to come out of agriculture. Second looming crisis is, of course, consists of that of youth, the 15 to 29-year-olds. Their education levels have increased very sharply, and that increase has taken place particularly in the first 15 years of this millennium. But now they are entering the labor force looking for work in larger and larger numbers. And these educated youth, including girls, are not going to work in agriculture. Their parents don't want to be in agriculture. They want jobs in industry and in services. But are jobs in the non-farm sector growing? When I use the term non-farm sector, I hope everyone's understanding. I'm talking about industry, including manufacturing, and also services. In this subgroup, I think it's very important for you to understand, is our girls. We know, we've already been told that the labor force participation rate of women in India is that at the level of Saudi Arabia and Yemen. There are almost no countries in the world which have as low a female LFPR as we do. Meaning, what is LFPR? Just to remind you, it's the share of the working age population, which, as I've been saying, has been rising, which is looking for work, but unfortunately, it is not finding work. And in this, I want to sort of say something very, very interesting. A survey was done by Nandi Foundation across 20 states of our country, asking the question to 13 to 19-year-old teenagers, what age do you want to get married? Now, you know that the legal marriage age in our country is 18 for women. Now, interestingly, because the vast majority of these girls have gotten educated, 25% of them said they don't want to marry until age 18 to 20. And 51% said they don't want to marry until between the ages of 21 and 25. In other words, 75% of these young girls don't want to marry at the age at which, their mothers gotten married. What is their expectation? Their expectation is jobs, non-farm jobs. So this is another looming crisis, a subgroup of the youth. And the final, so these are sort of the first and the second group consist of a potential flow that will come in, that should come in, or is coming into the labor force. And then there is the stock of the currently unemployed. Look at the crisis here. That last bullet I've just shown you. Right? That there were only 10 million people who were unemployed till 2012. Because the economy had been growing fast, a subject I will come back to. Just between 2012 and 2019, I have estimated the absolute number of people who were unemployed tripled to 30 million. This is before COVID. During COVID, that number increased even further, as I think Mahesh has demonstrated. I'm going to move on. So, just to say what I was saying earlier, growth of non-farm jobs was consistent between 2000 and 2012. And a major reason for that was that we were growing at somewhere between 7 and 8% on average, certainly between 2003-04 and 2015-16 at 8% per annum. And that growth rate, and hence the non-farm job growth, has fallen off after 2012. However, we must keep in mind that between 2000 and 2012-13, when we were growing fast, we were generating a lot more jobs than we have been generating since 2013. So there is ground for optimism, provided we go back to the trajectory of structural change and of fast growth that we were experiencing in that earlier period till about 2012. Okay, I'm going to move very quickly through this. I just want to show you here. Focus on these two bars here. This is showing how many non-farm jobs were being generated between 2000 and 2012. You can see 7.5 million new non-farm jobs were being added every year, which is why the unemployment rate was as low as it was, as I think has been mentioned earlier, a subject I will come back to. But since then, that non-farm job growth has fallen off to merely 2 million per annum. Please understand, between 2012 and 2018. I'm going to move fast because I don't want to take... Now, this slide is absolutely critical. I think you need to understand. This is part of my argument, particularly why I'm saying that there's been a reversal of structural change. You see, all the way since independence till 2004-05, while the share of agriculture in total employment was falling and the share of agriculture's contribution to output was falling, the absolute number of workers in agriculture was still rising. All the way till 2004-05. Never in the history of India before 2005 had the absolute number of workers in agriculture fallen. But note, and this is what this is showing, but notice what happens between 2005 and 12. This is that slide. This is that bar, the second bar. So many non-farm jobs were being created post 2005 because of that fast growth rate and the pattern of growth, that 5.5 or 5.3 million people were leaving agriculture every year. That process did continue, although it slowed down till about 2018 and even 19. But now what happens during COVID? The last two bars, look at those. 2020 and 2021. Unlike what you've been told that about 10 million people went back to agriculture during the lockdown of 2020, the increase in the absolute number of workers in agriculture was 45 million in 1 year alone. In 1 year alone. You know what that means? In 2019, there were 188 million people working in agriculture. In the following year, the first year of COVID, it went up to 233, a 45 million increase. And then Yes, we've been told that many people have been coming back, and it's true also. However, it's nowhere close to what you might imagine. Look at the last year for which we have data, which is that last bar. In 21 also, 8 million got added to agriculture. This is the opposite of structural change. Right? This is the opposite of structural change. Reversal. Okay. Again, it's not just that, the absolute number of workers in agriculture. What the implications of that are, I will show you, of such a large number getting added to agriculture. What I want you to focus on now is manufacturing. Right? Structural change means that the share of manufacturing in employment is rising, the share of manufacturing in output is rising. Now, the share of manufacturing, I'll come back to that output issue in a minute, but notice what happens so over this period from 2000 to 2012, there's an increase in manufacturing employment taking place, and particularly in organized manufacturing it was happening, but also in unorganized manufacturing, a subject which I cannot develop this now. But look what happens between 2012 and 2018. There's an absolute decline, which is the opposite of structural change. In other words, on the one hand, you are seeing, increase in absolute numbers in agriculture, and on the other hand, you are seeing a share decline in manufacturing employment, despite Make in India. I'm going to move on quickly in the interest of time. We are constantly told, Make in India. We've been doing Make in India. Well, manufacturing share of GDP was consistent between 1992 and 2016 at 17% when you include both organized and unorganized manufacturing. But manufacturing share of GDP drops post-2016 despite Make in India. Meaning you're saying Make in India, but the opposite is happening. That the contribution of manufacturing to GDP is actually falling. This is before COVID. Please don't think that this is just, during COVID, because you are constantly told, the whole world was impacted by COVID. This is before COVID. And the manufacturing share of GVA, of total GVA, which as I was saying was 17% earlier, it fell to 13.7. It rose slightly to 15.4, but then 13.9 in 2023. And so this is a first in post-1991 history, and possibly a first in post-1947 history, that the share of manufacturing to GDP is falling. And let's look at what happens to share of manufacturing in total employment. Look at the third bullet, it was 10.5% in 2004-05. It was rising as the growth rate is rising, and manufacturing growth was also robust. It was rising to 12.8% in 2012. And by comparison, you should understand this. Bangladesh, manufacturing contribution to employment is 16%. This is the country, and Vietnam is similar. These are the two countries which are attracting all the investment that is coming out of China. There was one wave of investment coming out of China. We thought we were going to get it because we were doing Make in India. There's been now a second wave which is on. Are we getting this? Yes, we've got Foxconn. But is that mostly coming here? No. It's mostly going to Vietnam and Bangladesh and Cambodia and Indonesia. So what I'm saying here is that manufacturing employment actually fell in absolute terms, mainly because unorganized manufacturing fell, especially, but not only in 5 most labor-intensive sectors. Mahesh very importantly talked about how tax break was given to the services sector for a 10-year period, as a result of which the services sector really contributed and significantly contributed to our GDP. Now, Manufacturing employment in the most recent period has fallen in our country because 50% of the manufacturing employment is in 5 labor-intensive sectors: furniture, textiles, garments, food processing, and leather and footwear. These 5. But these 5 have been seriously impacted because micro, small, and medium enterprises were damaged by demonetization. They were damaged by a sudden, unplanned GST, and then damaged again by the lockdown. It's interesting in all of this that organized manufacturing employment did grow between 1996 to 2007 by 5%. In fact, Vishwanath Goldar has come to this conclusion in a very recent paper just in January this year, and it continued to grow even beyond 2008. But this growth in organized manufacturing at the same time that MSMEs were shrinking was clearly happening as a result of organized manufacturing capturing unorganized manufacturing market shares. Let me quickly move on. The other sector where jobs are generated is construction. Well, construction jobs really were growing very rapidly in the earlier period, but notice what happens between 2012 and 2018, and this is what happens from there to down there. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to move really rapidly on from this point onwards. Services were the only sector that was seriously generating jobs. I'll just make a few points about employment quality. And this is a very important thing because this was mentioned in the morning. You see, if you look at periodic labor force survey data, obviously since 2017-18, what it shows is that the labor force participation rate is increasing, worker participation rate is increasing, and unemployment rates are falling. But you have to ask the question, how come this is happening at a time when the growth rate was declining post-2016? I told you what the reasons were: demonetization, GST, lockdown, and COVID. The growth rate is declining, but how's unemployment falling? And worker participation rate is rising. This is baffling. CMI data doesn't tell you this. CMI data tells you the opposite. And there is a reason for it, and I need you to understand why this is this inconsistency. The reason is that CMI doesn't count unpaid family labor as employment. BLFS does. What is unpaid family labor? It's a segment of those who are self-employed. Now notice what happens to unpaid family labor here, in the third block here. Between 2017 and 2020, it has gone from 51 million to 67 million. So in other words, the most distressful employment, which is, men and women at home who get paid nothing, are joining the labor force in this period when the growth rate is falling because their incomes are falling. That their incomes are falling, I will demonstrate to you in a slide or two. But the point is that this is being driven by unpaid family labor. And it would interest Satoshi that, in fact, the 19th International Conference of Labor Statisticians says unpaid family labor is not to be counted. CMI doesn't count it, but our periodic labor force survey counts it. And I've been trying to push the National Sample Survey Organization, because I'm a member of the Standing Committee on Economic Statistics of the government, and to get this, change the system to the 19th ICLS, but we're not going there. Anyway, I'm going to move on very rapidly. In the interest of time, this slide should interest you particularly. Because note, there are 3 bars here which are showing youth unemployment rates by level of education. And notice that, at the far left, you're seeing unemployment rates of the illiterates for 3 points of time, 2012, 2020, 2021. And notice that as the level of education rises from left to right, the open unemployment rate increases. And graduate unemployment, which was 20% in 2012, had gone to 34%, and postgraduate unemployment went from 18% to 37%. So in other words, what we've seen is that as a result of the growth rate falling, is not just jobs falling, unemployment rising, but also look what happened to wages. I want you to see this. From 2004-05 to 11-12, wages are rising, and post-2012, wages are tending to fall. Most recently, this is what the trend is. Either they are flat or they are actually falling. Why should we be surprised? If there are more and more people coming into the labor force looking for work, but they're not finding work, there are too many people looking for work. So employers can actually, either allow wages to stagnate or they can cut those wages. And tragically, I want you to focus just for a minute on this to see what proportion. Just look at the last block here. This is the total labor force, how much they earn per day. And this is showing that if you earn less than 200 rupees per day in 2020, and if you have a family of 5, that means your incomes are actually below the poverty line, the Tendulkar poverty line extended to 2020. And notice that 40% earn less than 200. And another 21%, the next bar, earns less than 300 rupees. I'm moving on very quickly in the interest of time. I could go on. I'm closing in my last couple of slides, and I want you to sort of understand what has in fact been happening. I'm summarizing here. Government inherited, this government that came to power in 2014, it inherited an open unemployment rate in the economy of 2.2%. In 2017-18, that had tripled to 6.1%, the highest in 45 years. And as I've just shown you, youth unemployment tripled as in an earlier slide. Structural change was aborted. In fact, it was reversed. Manufacturing share in employment, in GDP fell from 17% to 15% to 13%. Manufacturing share in employment, after rising from 10.5% to nearly 13%, fell to 11.5%. And there was an absolute fall in manufacturing employment, which is clearly tragic. This is part of my argument that, structural change has been reversed. And believe it or not, the share of agriculture in employment rose from 40% to 45% between 2018-19 and 2021 alone. The opposite of structural change. And the absolute number of agricultural workers, after falling for 15 years, rose by 53 million by 2021. And finally, the employment rate, which is the share of the working age population finding work, as defined rightly by Mahesh in the CMI work, fell from 43% in 2016 to 37% at a time when the unemployment rate rose. That means what we are seeing increasingly is the discouraged worker phenomenon rising. So where is our demographic dividend in all of this? Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Our distinguished speakers for today, Professor Alak Sharma, Mr. Satoshi Sasaki, Professor Santosh Mehrotra. On behalf of entire Symbiosis School of Economics family, it's my privilege to propose this vote of thanks. The discussion today has been very insightful, fruitful, and meaningful for all of us at SSE, and especially for our students who have been attending the conference with allured attention. The address by our speakers focused on the future of employment opportunities has been very captivating. We are aware that the Indian economy and its employment challenges has been multifaceted and to bring out clearly the various aspects is a huge challenge. Speakers of your stature could only bring out a clarity which is of importance to these young professionals to be. I thank our guests to spare their valuable time with us and making this second edition of the FECO conference a huge success. The conference would not have been possible without the support from Niti Aayog, NABARD, and IHT. We thank these institutions wholeheartedly for their continuous support. We also have a distinguished audience in the auditorium. I thank them for sparing their time and to have joined us for this session today. I also would want to thank the office bearers of Symbiosis School of Economics for making wonderful arrangements and their constant support in all our endeavors. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the paper presenters, delegates, and students for their presence and active participation. Thank you, one and all. May I now request everyone to stand up for the national anthem. Jai. Jai. Jai.